Welcome to the Activist Show. I, of course, am Dakota the Activist. Today we are going to be talking about different marches and different events that happened and discuss about their nonviolence and violent tendencies, or their nonviolent or violent marches. Now, I'm going to beginning with the formation of the Black Panthers. They were a revolutionary party founded in 1966 in Oakland, California. The two founders, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, originally formed the group to be a patrol in the African American neighborhoods. They were supposed to protect residents from the acts of police brutality. That organization quickly turned into a revolutionary group looking for exemption of African Americans from the draft, release of all African Americans from jail, and compensation for the slavery work in the back when slaves were legal. They were a more violent group, using guns, using their amendments to their advantages, their right to bear arms. They were a more violent group and had more violent tendencies. Along with the violence that the group brought, they also brought brought success into their neighborhoods, starting the breakfast program, which helped children who could not eat have breakfasts, have meals before school started. They were one of the groups that did use violence and sometimes had their own way of getting what they wanted, but they were a more violent group than other groups. Now on the way to the Selma March. In Selma, in 1966, the Selma, it was 1 to 2% of eligible black voters to vote. So only 1 or 2% in that town. So what happened was the Martin Luther King and other reverends and activists came together, tried to bring black people together to form a voters' rights in order to have them be able to vote. Because during the time, not a lot of people were able to vote. A lot of black people did not vote because they were not eligible for the literacy test. What happened was the local law enforcement of the town became unhappy with the black voters coming in to join voting, and they started beating the demonstrators outside of the eligibility zone, or the place where you can go become eligible. The demonstrators were shocked with cattle prods and beaten, and it became something very bad, and the march began for voter rights and the police brutality after the death during this time, the demonstrators. It happened so that one of the state troopers shot Jimmy Lee Jackson, who was a teen during the time, who was out demonstrating to get eligibility to vote. And when Martin Luther King decided, after the death of Jimmy Lee Jackson, he decided to hold a march he held a march to the capital of Montgomery. The governor of Alabama, George C. Wallace, did not like this march and told the state troopers to take whatever means necessary to stop the march. That's when we lead into Bloody Sunday. After marches past the Edmund Peters Bridge, marchers were attacked and beaten. More than 50 marchers were hospitalized. And it just turned into horrible scenes that were recorded and showed on TV. And many people really saw what was happening to those people marching. After Bloody Sunday, many more people joined the march because of what they saw and they all came together and said this was not right, and they joined the march. It was a peaceful protest and eventually won the battle for civil rights, along with voter rights, ending literacy tests for voters, and it was a success in my mind. Even though there were horrible things that came after it, it was the parts. Now on to the Watts riots. It started as a routine traffic stop, which then turned into the violence. A crowd began to grow around the traffic stop because they heard of what was happening. Marquette Fryer was the driver. He was the one who stopped and failed a test, and he panicked and just kind of, it started a fight between the officer and him. That's why the crowd started moving towards them, because they saw what they thought was another form of police brutality that was happening. So the crowd began to get angrier, and later on the mother showed up at the scene. The mother of Marquette Fryer showed up at the scene and saw that the police were abusing her son. And from that, it started another fight between the mother and the cops. And the crowd grew around them and became unsettled with what they were seeing. A mother trying to stop a cop from harming her son, and the crowd just grew and it became a complete war zone. Buildings and cars were set on fire. It lasted a total of 6 days, with 34 deaths, 1,032 injuries, 1,000 buildings burned, which totaled $40 million. This was in the Watts riots, which was in Watts, California, which was in a more African American community, and that's where kind of in my mind, this violence was not a success. Even today, there is a little change, so it didn't really have a big effect other than burning down houses, their own neighborhood, burning down their own neighborhood, and killing their own people. Now, in my own opinion of nonviolent and violent protests, which ones are better is, I guess I would say, the best way to say. I believe nonviolent protests are more effective. Seeing people not fighting back, but being beaten when they are just sitting on the ground has a bigger effect on people watching. A lot of people joined after because of the nonviolent protests, the fact that you would see women and children who were just sitting, or even in sit-ins in a restaurant, being dragged out and beaten just for rules that were not right or just. It seems it is it makes a larger impact to get what the people are protesting for than a violent protest, because when it becomes a violent protest, it becomes something bigger than it should be. But that's all we have for you today on The Activist Show. I, of course, am Dakota Jones, and I'm signing off.